welcome to Bots and Beyond, your weekly dose of all things automation, mixing up end user, vendor and consultant experience to create your go-to podcast for bot-related insights. I am your host, Wayne Butterfield. Hello and welcome back to Bots and Beyond. Another great episode lined up, another fantastic guest, somebody I've known for a long time, Mr. Jason Cripps. Hello, Jason.
Hi, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for coming on. And of course, really keen for the audience to hear a little bit more about yourself. Somebody I've known for a long time, and it's great to finally get you onto Bots and Beyond. So Jason's global head of intelligent automation over at Zurich. As I say, I've known him a long time. Really keen, though, for the audience to know a little bit more about you. So as is customary for all our guests on Bots and Beyond, if you can give us your intro of who you are, what you do, and obviously why you do it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Wayne. As always, a pleasure to be here as well. So, who am I? Well, I look after intelligent automation and operational excellence for Zurich Insurance. And I've been there for quite some time at the group, managed to do multiple different roles actually across the group. But the main thing that I'm doing there is joining up the different bits of work, if you like, around the group that we've got, particularly in automation, but to drive more efficient and effective outcomes, particularly for customers, but also for our employees. And that is really why I do this. It comes down to two things. I like to see people individually be at their best, so perform to their best, which I believe if they do within the organisation, it gives a much better outcome for the business as a whole. But more so, making sure that we give the best service and the best outcomes for our customers. And at the end of the day, it's all about delivering the promise that we have as a group to our customers who see themselves as being insured with Zurich Insurance.
It's an admirable why for a number of different reasons. I guess the kind of one that really stands out for me is the way that you kind of coupled augmenting your people with technology and making them better, and making your people better makes your business perform better, rather than using automation as a way of just purely stripping cost out. And I think that kind of mindset around almost creating cyborg employees, taking the best of the person and complementing them with technology, really interesting, and certainly something I'm sure that should resonate with the audience. So thank you for that. I think that's admirable and of course really important. Now, you've been in the insurance industry a while. Obviously, one of the things I was quite keen on is, I know about insurance now, right? And I know where it's going to a degree, but obviously there's been a lot of change over the years. I'd be really keen, for you to kind of, what's been your highlights? Anything in particular stand out over the last kind of 10, 15 years as, bigger changes where you thought actually that has changed our industry, or that this movement is changing our industry? What are the big things that stand out for you?
And asking me this question really does make me feel quite old, actually. So I've been with insurance for 33 years. So I know you said the last 10 to 15 years, but I'm going to step back a little bit further than that, actually, just to start with. I can remember the introduction of PCs into insurance. And my first role was doing quotes using a rate book, and rate book was quite a thing back then. Probably a good 6 to 12 inches thick in some cases, trying to do those. So I remember the introduction of the old Olivetti 286 back then, which took away the need to manually calculate quotes. And actually have a computer quotes on an old floppy disk. So, I know that's gone back further than you asked for, but it kind of set a trend really from there, that technology's being the biggest thing to impact insurance, not only internally within the operations of the business, but obviously externally with our customers. And it went from there. The introduction of email was something quite radical at the time, because we used to use the old carbon copy paper. on sending things to and from head office in envelopes. Of course, you then come a bit closer to this time. We then went through the e-business and web evolution. Of course, mobile technology has really moved from the brick mobile phones to what we have today, which are pocket-sized computers in effect. We had things like GPS that started to appear, satellite things, and we really move up to date with the automation and AI, and then the real drive use now of data that we see, and virtual working, and within all of that, the two things that, though, whilst that's very technology focused, I'd say underline that the two biggest things that have probably changed in that time for me, apart from the propositions that we're now able to get out to market and the time we can serve customers, is literally around the people focus, the real thinking about our people, the skills, putting them right at the center of things within the organization, and then the customer focus, really getting to some customer centric outcomes and processes. And those, I'm sure, Wayne, within there's many other things as well, and I know there are, that have changed over that 33 years. But if you focused it down into the three things, it's the technology change, the people, and the customer focus. And of course, what we see today, as you mentioned just now, the augmentation of technology alongside people, and in fact, alongside the customer proposition. So that things like straight through processing on claims or on underwriting is now, a reality, rather than many years ago just a thought of being possible.
Great, and I said 10 to 15 years because I was trying not to kind of labour on the point that you've been in industry, certainly since I've been at school and in work. So, but I didn't want to labour on that point. I thought I was being kind by saying 10 to 15 years, but it was even greater, the change that you've seen. So I think it was definitely relevant to mention it. I mean, I still remember the early computers, but I almost now it's incomprehensible to think about work before the PC. Right? It's almost too difficult to compute for me that how would work get done without it. So yeah, wow, what a set of transformational technologies you've seen hit the floor. So I guess what I would be very keen to do, and obviously you've answered it to a degree, but if you think about that evolution, and then let's think about something more insurance specific, then really getting into it, claims processing, right? It's the holy grail of, hey, if we can automate claims processing, then we're going to be X, Y, and Z better. But, how have you seen, this kind of evolution of technology affect claims processing over, I would say, obviously, over the last 30 odd years, but I guess more, has that transformation been greater recently, or did you see, bigger changes earlier on, which you think have had more impact? I mean, just think about, claims specifically. Really keen to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I'm a claims specialist, subject matter expert in its entirety, but I've definitely been involved in claims all over the world and different parts of claims as well. So from a general insurance point of view and a life insurance point of view, and whether that's operating in Mexico or in Europe or elsewhere, the outcome is always the same, and that's about us honouring that promise and paying what is due to the claim to the customer. But you take the different parts of it, Wayne, and I think things like first notice of loss, with the use of technology and digitisation now, we can do that in various ways, using mobile or apps to really speed up that process from a customer point of view. I've seen the risk-based approach change as well. So where there's a smaller claim value, maybe it goes through a much quicker process than in the old days before technology was able to help, where every case would have the full manual risk review to make sure the claim was appropriate for payment. And we think about today as straight through processing. Well, the advent of the technology that we have has enabled that to happen, where a customer today could notify us through an app of a motor accident, let's say, for example. And actually, it could go all the way through to payment without being touched by an individual within inside the organisation, and that's come about by automation or intelligent automation, or using things like natural language processing. If there's information that's being exchanged in documents to understand what's in there. Now, there are always certain things that would still fall out of that and go to a claims expert to be evaluated and then determined whether the payment amount is right. But that whole process, and if I look at the life side of the business, things where you've got large medical documents, for example, information that needs to be ingested from a claim, especially around disability claims, those things now can be ingested digitally, read and interpreted and provided back a summary to claims assessors very quickly, as opposed to taking days to read that set of information. So I think, and you see the technology has really driven a change in that end-to-end process, which ultimately gives a much better cycle time and return to the customer. So you're not waiting weeks and months for things to happen. It can literally happen in hours and days. And the other side to that for me is data. We haven't as yet touched on the data side of it, but data is becoming more and more prevalent and used today. And so from an organizational point of view, it can help you detect in various ways fraud if it is taking place, and hopefully that's not taking place, but leakage as well within the claims payments or the end-to-end of a claim payment. So, and I think that there's more in there as well, Wayne, that can help. But digitisation, and I know you picked up on claims, but you can see the same thing happening within underwriting as well, and other areas of insurance where technology is really starting to drive a change. The key thing for me, though, is back to what we said earlier on, is around your people and the people focus, and being able to make sure that those technologies are augmenting the roles and actually freeing them up to do other things that's really value add within that customer journey and that customer proposition.
I think you spoke then about obviously significant change as a result of digital. I think obviously for me it's a completely undervalued area. People and process so important, and with your background of operational excellence amongst other things, I know you will know more than anyone that people in process is definitely so important, and that actually this role of digital is only really as good and as beneficial, I guess, as the people and the process that it's either amending or being rolled out to. And you've seen the digitization of the workplace in theory. One of the challenges that organizations have really struggled with, I guess, is creating or showcasing that value and obviously making it sustainable. Now, I know that will be something that you guys have been doing for a while, certainly in the operational excellence forum. But have you got any kind of thoughts on actually creating value, creating benefits, showcasing what you've done? What do you track? How do you track? It'd be really good just to say. And is there a difference between tracking digital transformation and automation in your view, or actually is it all the same? And actually, the same processes, methodologies, methods work, regardless of whatever change it is that you're implementing.
Sustainability is the key piece within there. And just to answer the last part of your sort of intro question there, the automation for me is an enabler of delivering sustainable benefits, which in turn then, if you get this right, it enables that whole digital transformation. And for me, the automation piece and all the different components within intelligent automation help you to reimagine what the process could be, as opposed to being constrained by the old, legacy systems and legacy processes, the old, we've always done it this way kind of approach. And So far we've not mentioned the COVID word, but in the last 18 months, the COVID environment and what that's brought about has really accelerated some of that automation and therefore digital transformation that's happened, because we've had to reimagine processes. Okay, we've had to rethink about how we can do things without face-to-face, customer and us, etc., etc. So that's driven it through. From a tracking point of view, I've always been a believer that if you set the right ambition and vision up front, and that shouldn't be the requirement to reduce headcount as an outcome, which I think is a typical mistake. You go after an FTE reduction because that actually drives not a digital transformation, just an organisational change, which is tracking to a number. For me, an outcome should be if it's a cost reduction or it's an efficiency. That's what should be after. So when I set these programs or projects up, or working with the countries to do so, typically want to look at and track in 4 different areas that together combined will give you that outcome that you want, or I'm saying the one, which is enterprise efficiency, but then in particular, the better customer outcomes that we're really after. So you look at the process excellence side of it, if you like, from a start point. Where have we mapped processes? Do we understand the processes? Do we know the customer journey that customers go on today and where they should be? Ideally, we want them to go to. Where is our service delivery? How much of it is manual today? How much of it could move from manual to be automated? How much of it is actually waste in a process built around, again, old historic processes and business systems that we've got? Then you can move into that intelligent automation piece and say, to what degree do we have automation capabilities that are either rolled out or being rolled out into the marketplace? And that could be something as simple as how much of our document ingestion is now electronic, actually being ingested digitally. So it's being scanned. It's then being using natural language processing techniques and OCR and ICR being understood, data and information being extracted, being interpreted, those sort of things, as well as processing things. And then the last part of the 4 things that then gives you that outcome is looking at the employee side of it, the customer side of it, and the business value. And we do use NPS, both internally and externally, as key measures for us as a group within that customer piece. But those, it's still based on that ambition. What is it you're trying to do? And then those 4 quadrants, if you like, of areas to really measure. And underneath there, there's a set of different measures you might have, Wayne, depending on to some degree the line of business that you're doing, or which area of the business you're actually operating in. They'll be slightly different, say, for a HR function than they might be for claims, as we mentioned earlier. Then again, they would be for a finance function. But it's making sure that those things that you measure and track are very pertinent and relevant to the business area and operations that you're working with.
And I'm conscious that was a very broad question, but I think that was a fantastic answer covering just about every aspect. So brilliant. One of the things I was thinking about when you were talking there is, if we think about generally operational excellence, I always get asked this question, right? So do we automate a process as is, or should we really fix it first? And I guess my answer has always been, never automate a bad process, but if you can avoid it, don't take 6 months to lean it out, to gather data, lean it out, improve it, to then automate it. Because in theory, you could have, been claiming benefits on that process for the last 4 months, getting a load of data that is being produced while it's automated, and still end up in 6 months in a similar place, but with 4 months worth of benefit. Now, that's my type of it depends. I'd be really keen to get your view. What do you think is the right thing? Because that is a common question, and I think you are perfectly placed. And I'd be very keen to hear what you have to say on that particular question, at least.
Yeah, and we're not miles apart on this, Wayne. By saying, yeah, I mean, I start from the point of view that we should remove waste, right? So I always used to say we should stop things first. That's the first thing you should always do. Then you should simplify. Then you should optimize. Then you can look at what solutions you might apply. And that's automation. It might be outsourcing, et cetera, et cetera. So, but you always start with the stop. But I do caveat that, not similar to what you've said there, because you should take the waste out of the process. But if it's going to take you a long time to understand that process and get to a better one, then I'm in the other camp of going automate the process as is. As you say, you then capture a whole load of information that can give you the opportunity then to root out where there's waste in that process. And particularly if you need to create some capacity in order to do the next set of automation or efficiency programs. So a lot of business areas are constrained with resource. And for me, automating the first or second process, if you like, very quickly, no matter how bad the process is a way for you to free up and create capacity to do what you want to do next, and even go back and revise that process. I think the other tools that have now come into play for me that really start to help is things like process mining. The process mining tools now for me, and it's one of my team used to say this when he was working on it, is it's like lean on speed. So black belt, I'm used to doing the old lean efficiency program, mapping stuff with post-it notes on the wall. When you now connect process intelligence tools and process mining tools to it, and you can see where the opportunities are that can then drive a faster take up of the automation solution and removing waste, right? And that's the key thing. We should be removing waste out of processes and things that are unnecessary. So we're not too far apart, Wayne, and I've done both. I've done it to help business areas just automate several processes to create capacity, give them the benefit now whilst we're waiting for the next thing that's going to come along. But also said, actually, look, your best bet is we should mine this process, have a look at it, and then go into automation. And sometimes, actually, the solution isn't to automate at all. It's actually just to remove the process. Stop doing the things that we're doing because it's not adding any value to anybody. So you need to get the right outcome. I think underlining both your approach and my approach, Wayne, is don't always assume that automation is the only way to do something. There are other options out there, and it's about picking the right option for the particular solution and outcome that you're after.
I'm pleased you picked up on the process mining point, because actually that's something I was going to ask you. I guess the thing I was extra interested in is in kind of your view, when is it right to use process mining? When is it better to do kind of manual process discovery? Have you kind of got any hard and fast rules about that? Because I think process mining as an area is one that's obviously growing in importance, and I know you've spent a bit of time really reviewing the area. So I'd be really keen to get your view on that. When to and when not to use process mining in your view.
Yeah, if you have the opportunity to use process intelligence and process mining, the ideal situation for that, if you like, is to have a high volume of let's call it transactions that are going through a process. You have a clean, or at least a relatively clean digital footprint, i.e., if I've got Wayne's, I'll go back to claims. If I've got Wayne's claims being processed, and it might well be just because of the way the organisation is that claim in the background is being processed on 2, 3, maybe 4 different systems, but for various reasons. If that digital footprint is recognisable, i.e., I can very quickly identify Wayne's claim on system A, B, C, and D by a single identifier that marries them all together, then you're in a really good place to extract that information and use. And also there needs to be some date stamps and other things in there as well. But if you've got those 3 components, then actually process intelligence is the way to go deliver a thorough mapping, and I'd say an unemotional mapping, so it's fact-based of what's happening within a process. If though you don't have some of those things, or it's a smaller volume of transactions, or even it's something that's not really lends itself to transactional processing. So, for example, maybe in a compliance function or an audit function or some of those other peripheral areas, then you probably want to go back to the traditional lean methodology to find where the efficiencies are and the opportunities for continuous improvement. So I think that's the way I sort of look at that, Wayne, as the way when you would want process intelligence, and remembering it's all about data handling at the end of the day, and these tools can get through thousands and even millions of transactions and map them very efficiently for you, which you would never be able to get to as an individual, no matter how big your team is, right? You just wouldn't be able to get to look at that number of transactions on a fact-based basis to give you the true picture of what's happening within the organisation.
Absolutely. Do you know, I could talk about this topic all day because I think that there you hit the nail on the head very much on that last point around this is and can be incredibly powerful technology for those processes which, whether you know it or not, have such variation that you would never categorize them all manually. I think one of the examples I saw from one of the leading players was around, I think it was claims processing, and there was 4,000 different variants of the process as the data told them. Yeah. I'm sorry, but there's no way on earth that A, you would even know that. B, if you imagine automating claims, you would never plan for that many scenarios. You'd be like, right, well, the top 8 things that we do are X, Y, and Z, and that's what we've planned for. And then you'd be like, why haven't we got straight through processing on 50% or more? It's like, well, actually, you've only accounted for 3% of the variations within your process. It shouldn't be a surprise, but I think for many it often is, because if you rely on the person doing the process to tell you what it is that they do, there's no way on earth they could know that many things could happen and do happen. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important, and I always go back to kind of having it as a tool in your toolkit, for the right scenario, right tool, right job. That's what this is for me. So intelligent automation is an ecosystem of technologies where right tool, right job, right scenario. And one of the skills that we as people and as leaders need in that is to know when to use a person, when to use a tool. When you're using a tool, what is the tool? And so it's more of a facilitator across this ecosystem. And I know that's something that you are very good at within Zurich. I've got one more question. I'm conscious that we are definitely running out of time. We have spoken about technology a lot. And you have alluded to people previously. Now, for most, change is, whether it's easy or hard, is not necessarily something that is easy to implement, whether you're accepting or not of it. Kind of talk to me a little bit about any experience, positive or bad, around bringing your people on that journey, making use of technology, evolving your workforce. We did touch upon it earlier, but keen, last question, any kind of thoughts on your experience in evolving your workforce to work with new technology, to work with new process, new ways of working, etc.?
Yeah, this is a really important one, right? The people that you have within the business are the business at the end of the day. They have knowledge of processes, obviously within their head, or things that are going on within the organisation. We have, super experts within different fields within the organisation, and we need to be. The key thing here from a workforce evolution is recognising and being transparent with our people that things are changing and being impacted by the digital world. So I'll give you a good example. We just talked about process intelligence. Okay, so a lean black belt Six Sigma expert is used to doing the way that they work. But process intelligence doesn't replace that individual. Okay, if you augment a black belt expert with process intelligence tools, they will then find and use that as a way to drive a much quicker outcome for you because they've got data and information and the technology to help them. For me, it is that piece about identifying, well, what is likely to happen within the different functional areas we've got and which roles could be impacted. And there are tools around in the marketplace that can help you with this as well. And it's back to that transparency piece again, where you're actually getting your people involved in this to say, look, we know this technology. Where do you think it can help you in your role? And what does that mean for your role? Because actually it's going to change from being an administrative role to more of an assessor role for the outcomes that come through these technologies, or maybe QA and other types of things can change totally. So another one of the areas that I'm quite passionate about, and it's something we'll have to pick up on another time, I'm sure, is using things like voice analytics, interaction analytics in customer journey. And if you think about some of those tools today in the manual world, if we're lucky, our QA teams probably touch 5%, if we're lucky, of the interactions when we're doing the assessments, whereas those analytics tools can help them get to 100% assessment of all of the interactions and identify where they should then spend their time looking more deeper into the positives or even the negatives, interactions that we've had with customers. So I think there's a clear approach and a clear strategy that needs to be had from organisations to work through where do we think the biggest impact is, what are those roles, and what could they or will they shape out to look like in the future. But of course, technology still moves and shifts, and take people with you on that journey and get them involved in it. Don't leave them in the dark, because as soon as you leave your employees and your people in the dark, they just assume their role is going to be replaced. Because at the end of the day, Wayne, you and I both know that's what's in the papers a lot of the time, is that bots will be taking over this world before you and I have retired, as it were.
Yes, the papers do love a good story, right? Regardless of what we've seen actually happen over the last decade. This has been fantastic. I could talk to you all day about this, and I have another 50 questions whirling around in my mind that I'd love to quiz you on, but maybe we'll save that for another episode. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm hoping that the audience has gained in as much out of this conversation as certainly I have. So thank you for spending the time with us.
Been an absolute pleasure, Wayne, and I've got loads of questions for you as well, but we'll keep those for another time.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, Jason. Thank you for listening, everybody else, and we'll speak to you soon.